Hey everybody, so this is Delta's birth story. I was thinking about it recently and I thought, I haven't shared her birth story. I did share Dana's and someone had requested it too, so I thought, I should film this. I'm only a year and a half late. um, so yes, Delta was planned. We had been trying for about 6 months, and one day, Dan and I had both been in Eugene that day, and I can't remember. We had separate cars though, so he came shortly home after me, and I just felt different. I couldn't explain what the difference was, but I just felt different, and so I took a pregnancy test, and I was pregnant. So I remember he came home, we got into bed, and I said, well, I have something for you, and I handed it to him, and he's like, oh, does this mean what I think it means? And I said, yeah. And he's like, are you ready? And I said, ready as we'll ever be, I guess. And so it was a good thing for us. I have always, so my mom had 3 miscarriages out of 5 pregnancies, two children out of the 5 pregnancies. So I grew up thinking that, or hearing that miscarriages are common, and that I'm just going to have them or some. And I know how painful that is, and I just always kind of had it in the back of my mind to prepare myself. And thankfully, I've had both my girls and no miscarriages. And so even finding out I was pregnant, I still in the back of my mind was like, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, anything could happen. So, but I stayed pregnant, and I developed gestational diabetes pretty early on, and they put me right on insulin, which was pretty surprising. I just thought you would go on metformin or change your diet and that would be that. And they're like, no, you need insulin. And so that was a fun adventure. They started me out on a really high dose, and I would drop really low. And I actually got kind of scared. I was traveling for work at the time, and Dan was on leave, so I would be gone for 3 or 4 days at a time, and I was staying at my friend's house. And I got really nervous because at home there were times where my blood sugar would drop in the middle of the night, and I was so shaky. I was having a hard time, getting some sort of carbohydrate to bring my blood sugar back up. So I would have to wake up Dan, and he would help me. And it got to where I would have cans of juice next to the bed, and it was really, really uncomfortable. So I was always afraid I would have a problem in the middle of the night at my friend's house. And so thankfully I never did. I did buy, it's like sorry, my neighbor's mowing. It's like a liquid, it comes in a tube, but it's like liquid glucose maybe as like an emergency treatment. But they were able to dial back my dose a bit so that I wouldn't have those big drops. I don't remember being on any special like diet other than like the traditional pregnancy diet. Excuse me. I'm supposed to have sushi, which I don't like sushi. You're not supposed to have lunch meat or deli salads like in the case because of possible listeria. So yeah, I mean, the insulin kind of took away that need for like super low carb or anything, and they really don't want you to be low carb or keto when you're pregnant anyways. So overall, I felt like the pregnancy was fine other than the diabetes. I started to have a little bit of sciatic pain, which is that kind of in your butt cheek pain, like lower than your lower back. And I had it really bad with Dana, like really bad. And so I knew right away, like, okay, I'm not messing with it. And so I went to the chiropractor, and I want to say this was at about 30 weeks or so. And so she did some adjustments, and I didn't have it the rest of the time. So that was a huge blessing. If you're dealing with pregnancy, sciatic pain, go see a chiropractor, please. So they had been monitoring my pregnancy because I had preeclampsia pretty bad with Dana right at the end. And so they had, I was going in, I believe, twice a week to have the monitor hooked up, and they would check Delta's heart rate, and they would do an ultrasound. And everything looked good. I got to know the nurses there, and, you know, got to look at the baby, which was nice. And they would check my blood pressure. And so, New Year's Eve, I go during the day to get my testing done, and my blood pressure was elevated. And I kind of knew what that meant, but I was still, Dan was at work, and I was still like, okay, just breathe. She's like, okay, I have to go get the doctor and talk to you about it. And so she comes back. Like, I don't know why I'm getting emotional, but it was emotional at the time. She comes back and she's like, okay, well, we have to start like inducing you, and you're going to have the baby tonight. And I was like, what? But this was at 38 weeks. I just barely hit 38 weeks. And she said, you know, it's important that we have a healthy baby and a healthy delivery and all that. I knew all of it, and I knew her from going there. But I was still like, okay. So I was just overwhelmed. So I went to the bathroom, and so she said, okay, go have a big lunch, go home and get your hospital bags, and then come check in. Or at labor and delivery. So I go in the bathroom, and I have to call his work and ask to speak to him, and got a hold of him and told him, like, we're having a baby tonight. Like, you got to leave work, and we got to figure this out. So he left, and so being that I was induced, it can take a long time. And so we kind of looked at, okay, time frame wise, what would be the best thing. And so it takes a while for him to get actually off work, because they have to coordinate a few things. So the plan is that he would go get off work, go home, take a shower, because, you know, we didn't know when he would be able to really do that next, and then eat a meal, and then get to the hospital when he can. So I went home. I first stopped at Starbucks, you know, the important things. I did drink caffeine during my pregnancy, and I have a long torso. So being pregnant, even full term, I carried my babies like, I don't know, like I didn't like balloon out. It wasn't necessarily obvious to someone that I was pregnant. I'm also a big person, so sometimes people didn't know that I was pregnant. Same thing when I was pregnant with Dana. So I went to Starbucks and ordered my iced coffee with cream, you know, no sweetener. And she's like, so are you doing anything fun tonight? And I said, well, I'm having a baby. She's like, what? And I said, yeah, I'm pregnant, and they're going to induce labor tonight, and yeah, we'll see what happens. And she's like, oh my God, that's so awesome. Congratulations. And that was kind of a fun moment. One of those that you won't ever forget. But so I went home. I can't even remember what I ate. I don't even think I was hungry, but I'm like, okay, what am I doing? So we had our hospital bags packed. I go to the hospital and get checked in, and I wasn't dilated, I don't think at all, or maybe like half or something. So I think Dan got there like an hour and a half after. So they got me checked in and got me to my room and kind of got me set up. It's been a while, so I can't remember exact details, but for the most part, it was a lot more relaxed than when I had Dana. I was also induced with Dana. And yeah, I'm just like, okay, I don't know. It was just a different vibe, much more relaxed. I forgot to mention that Dana stayed with Dan's mom while we were in the hospital, so she picked her up from daycare, but she was able to bring her for a visit that first night. And I think it's because I knew what to expect. So they said, well, what we're going to do is Ceridel. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's a medication that softens your cervix, and it looks like a strip of tape, and they place it on the cervix, and then you have to wait 12 hours. And at that point, it was 5 o'clock. And so I knew we wouldn't have a New Year's Eve baby or like the first baby of the year, but that was okay. And so we knew she would be a 2019 baby. I think at that point I was starting to dilate and softened enough that they didn't need to do that. They just started me on Pitocin. For delivery, you know, before my first baby, I had looked online at all these beautiful delivery gowns and such, but Dana had pooped as she was coming out, so it was a mess everywhere along with everything else. So whatever I wore, and I don't even remember what I wore, totally got ruined. So I knew the second time around, okay, I'm not going to wear anything fancy. So I ended up having one of my cami like tank tops, and it was dark blue, and I wore that. And so started Pitocin, I started dilating, and I was kind of uncomfortable. They didn't do the epidural yet at this point, and it's just a lot of pressure. And I remember the first time around, I said the exact same thing, but right about that time, you're pretty uncomfortable. And I'm like, Dan, we're not doing this anymore. Oh, I hate being pregnant, blah, blah, blah. Whereas, I was just saying how much I loved being pregnant. So he always kind of laughs at me like, okay, and so we talked about the epidural because the first time around, I had a lot of problems with the epidural. The first one, I think it had slipped out is what had happened, but it stopped working. And so they pulled it all, placed a new one. That one did not work at all. Like, I don't know much about like giving epidurals, but it didn't work at all. So then they placed a third one, which worked enough to make, labor more comfortable. So this time around, I knew there might be a problem, and I understand at my size, the way my body is shaped, it is probably hard to place it in the right spot. So I'm not, I don't blame any of the anesthesiologists at all. It just is what it is. So this time around, I spoke up ahead of time about all the problems that I'd had before, and so I wanted to make sure that it was placed properly before we really got into it. So the doctor told me she normally wouldn't order an epidural that quickly, but, understood and agreed to do it. So the epidural was placed, and it was placed properly because I'm like, oh, this is what it's like. I felt like my legs were in a warm ocean. Like it was like water was whoosh, whoosh. Like it was just like the most relaxing thing ever. And I just couldn't stop smiling because I was like, oh, this is what I missed out on the first time. Okay, I get it now. And I remember texting pictures to like my friends and family, like, hey, having a baby, just and what a difference. So things sped up, and the I guess going back a little bit, when the clock struck midnight, all the nurses and doctors in the hallway were celebrating, and we were looking at each other like, I guess we're gonna have a New Year's Day baby, not a New Year's Eve baby. And so we fast forward back, dilating more, she checked me a couple of times, and then I got the shakes. So I believe this happened the first time around too, but when it gets close to labor, and I don't know exactly what the verbiage is, but there's some sort of turning point. I get the shakes really bad, like as if I'm like freezing cold, but I'm not cold. It's just the adrenaline, or it's something in your system that's making you shake like that. So I could tell I was getting close, and I could feel like the pressure of her dropping. And Dana came pretty quickly once she was ready, or I was ready, or whatever. So with Dana, once I was fully dilated and effaced and all that, I pushed for 15 minutes and she was out. So it was really quick. And so we all knew that, the doctors and I talked about that. So we were kind of prepared for a quick birth. And so I got the shakes. I was on my side. I could just feel her dropping, not pain, but lots of pressure. And she had just checked me. And so I was feeling that kind of like guilt, like, oh man, I don't want her to have to come back in and check me again, but it feels like she's going to pop out. And so I said, Dan, I need you to get the nurse. And so the nurse came back in and I told her what was happening, and the doctor came back in and she's like, oh, yep, you're ready. Okay. And so we flipped the stirrups up. There's handles like for me to like pull down on, and I'm not even sure how many pushes, but they clocked it at 3 minutes from when I was like, deemed ready to when I actually pushed her out. So that was pretty intense. It was really fast, but we knew it would be fast. I'm curious if we ever had another one, what that birth would be like, because, they were similar and different. So with Kaiser, they do skin to skin. I can't remember for how long, but it's longer than like traditional. It's really up to the parent. But so they put her on my chest, and I honestly, like, even with Dana, I was so overwhelmed and so like, oh my God, like what just happened, that I wasn't in the right frame of mind to have that beautiful like, oh, moment. I mean, I'm trying to like see her, like it's just a blur kind of, and they're all covered in gunk. And so I said, if you want to go ahead and clean her up first, that's totally fine. I need a minute to kind of collect myself anyway. So they did that. Dan, I think, followed her over, and I remember, pretty sure it was Delta. I don't think it was with Dana, but I saw something and I'm like, does she have all of her toes? Because it looked like she had double the amount of toes, and it must have been just her feet were kind of overlapping, but he's like, yes. So she was born, and yeah, I mean, just overall, it was just way easier than the first time, and the first time wasn't even that bad. So I wanted to get up and moving around as quickly as possible. We got moved to the maternity ward, and I was walking around. So they had a shift change, and one of the nurses came in, and she's like, I can't even believe that you're my patient, because you were walking around. I didn't realize like you were the patient. I thought you were just someone's guest. So she's like, well done, like, good job. You don't even look like you went through labor. And I was really proud of myself for that. I felt like I went through this thing, but I was really resilient, and I chose not to breastfeed, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to have opinions on that and judge me for it, I guess. But the reason why is because with Dana, I tried really hard to breastfeed her, and it just wasn't happening. And she was born, both of them were born at 6 pounds 8 ounces. Dana got down to 5 pounds something ounces, and just was not putting on any weight. And so we went to the doctor's office for a weight check the next day or 2 days later, and I just could feel her shrinking in my arms, and it was very, very traumatic for Dan and I, and probably her, because she was just screaming all the time. So the doctor gave us a bottle of formula with a nipple on it right there in the office, and said she needs to drink this now. And so it was really scary. And so this time around, I thought, for whatever reason, my body was not producing milk, and I'm not doing that to my second child. And so we did formula right away, and they had formula there at the hospital. And Delta did lose some weight as well. Both girls had acid reflux, and so they were put on medication pretty quickly. But otherwise, I had some uterus pain, like the contractions. After you have a baby, it has to contract back. So that was pretty painful. I didn't experience that with Dana, but they said it's probably because I wasn't breastfeeding and I wasn't trying to breastfeed. So, yeah, I think that was probably the worst part of it. Overall, I was just really lucky with both pregnancies and both deliveries, that they went so well, being that I was at such a high weight. So I feel really blessed. I would love to have another one if I was younger and probably thinner and had more energy. But anyway, that is Delta's birth story, and she was born on New Year's Day. And yeah, thank you for watching.